Welcome to Sravz Technical Series. In today's session, we'll discuss Docker Swarm-based deployment of WordPress. So far at Sravz, we were running WordPress on AWS EC2 instances, but that turned out to be very costly. So today, I'll show you how to deploy WordPress on a Docker Swarm on Contabo. Contabo provides you very much cheaper VPS options. So in Contabo, I purchased 5 VPS instances, and then I deployed the Docker Swarm containers, Docker Swarm on that. And in a previous video, I showed how to deploy Docker Swarm. So it's here, Docker Swarm setup. Following that, you can deploy Docker Swarm on the Contabo VPS. Once the Docker Swarm is set up, you can use the deployment I'm showing today to deploy WordPress on the Docker Swarm. So before I show the Docker Compose, I'll just quickly go through the website. So this is running on Docker Swarm. The whole website works fine, and also it's connected to the database. In this case, it's MySQL database. So all this data is stored in the MySQL database. So the website works. This is where we deploy Srav's career site, the job site. So this is deployed using WordPress. So this is the code base. This is the Docker Swarm. There are 5 nodes in the Docker Swarm. All the nodes are managers. There are 5 nodes and all 5 are managers. And then the services are deployed on this Swarm cluster. So there's a MySQL service and then Srav's WordPress job, 5 out of 5. It's a global deployment. And this is one replica. So if you look at the data flow diagram, we have the 5 nodes and the Docker Swarm is there. This is the Docker Compose, which is used to deploy the Swarm-based WordPress. Created a network. The network has there are 2 networks in the Swarm cluster. One is web, which is external equal to true. So this will expose the container to the outside world, on which we run traffic and WordPress. And then we have an internal network, which is encrypted, on which we run the MySQL database. Then this is the IP address management configuration. So we're going to use this subnet for the network. Then in the services part, we first have the traffic container, which is version 3.0.1, and then it's a deployment global. So an instance of traffic runs on all the Docker Swarm instances, and all the Docker Swarm instances have traffic equal to true setup as the label, so it will run on all of them. We have the restart policy of any delay 5 and 120, and there's a bunch of environment variables which we need for the traffic to run. I won't go through this because it's more specific to Srav's website. Then the traffic exposes these ports from the host into the container. So from the host, port 80 is mapped to container port 80. From the host, 443 is mapped to 443 in the container. And then we have to mount the volume, which is the Docker socket, as read only. So that way traffic will know which containers are alive, which containers are gone, and accordingly it will update its reverse proxy table. So that's how traffic will know which services are present to route the traffic. So for that, traffic needs read-only access to the Docker socket, and this Docker socket is part of the Docker Swarm, so it will also get access to all the Swarm related data. Then we provide a bunch of secrets. These are traffic specific. You could go through traffic documentation for that. I'm not going to give the details on that. And then traffic is on the network web. Then we have the WordPress container, which is of I just picked the SHA from Docker Hub, but it can also run the latest. And then we map this host port to this port for testing purpose. You can remove this one. Then we map the WordPress data, which is on the host machine, to this directory on the container. So this is how the container will have access to the WordPress information. Then deployment is global. With global, it means it's going to run on all the instances in the Docker Swarm cluster. Restart policy and bunch of traffic labels. So to reach to this container, we have to access from this host name, and then there's a bunch of other traffic related configuration. If you have any questions on this, you can reach me out in the YouTube channel or in the discussion tab here. And then the WordPress is on the network's web and the internet. WordPress has to be on internal because we have MySQL database which runs on the internal network. And then this is standard MySQL deployment. We have this command, and then MySQL data is on at this directory on the host, which we map to this directory in the container. And that's how MySQL will have access to the data. And then there's a bunch of secrets we map from the files which are mounted into the containers. So with that, I conclude the discussion on the Docker compose file. Traffic-based, Docker Swarm-based WordPress runs fine. As I showed you here, the site is up and it's running fine. So there are certain things you have to keep in mind when you run this setup. There's only single instance of MySQL database, so it's best to periodically back up the data. These WordPress containers have the data on their own instances. So when you have to make changes to the WordPress template, it is best to scale down the instances so that there's only one WordPress instance, then update the data in the WordPress, and then rsync the file changes to rest of the host. And since MySQL database is only a single instance, you can just keep it that way, and you can hit the admin page from any of the hosts, because since there's a single database, it will get updated automatically. And if you want to have high availability, you can run multiple Docker swarms, and then using DNS round robin mapping, you can map both the Docker swarm IP addresses, so that way when the client connects, the client will be routed to either of the Docker Swarm clusters. So that way you get the high availability. And in that scenario, you have to ensure that you keep both the databases in sync. So I'll leave that for you as an exercise. So with that, I'll conclude today's session. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please reach me out in the discussion tab here or in the YouTube channel.